war, a word that conjures images of swords, spears, guns, tanks, and missiles. But what if I told you that, throughout history, the tools of battle haven't always been, well, conventional? Get ready to dive into the bizarre, the mind-boggling, and the downright strange world of weapons that will leave you scratching your head. From flying tanks to explosive rats, welcome to our list of the weirdest weapons in history. Number 10. Pigeon-guided missiles. Sounds like something out of a science fiction comic, right? But during World War II, the US military seriously explored the idea of using pigeons to guide missiles. Yeah, you heard that right. Pigeons as missile pilots. The brain behind this odd invention was none other than behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner. Skinner trained pigeons to peck at an image of the target projected inside the missile's nose cone. The birds were supposed to guide the missile by pecking to adjust the direction based on where they saw the target. Surprisingly, the pigeons did well in simulations, but the military eventually scrapped the project. Maybe it was a little too bird-brained. Number 9. The gay bomb. No, this isn't a joke. The United States Air Force actually researched a weapon known as the gay bomb in the 1990s. It was designed to release a powerful aphrodisiac over enemy soldiers, making them more interested in each other than in fighting. The idea was to lower morale and efficiency without causing physical harm. Fortunately, the concept never made it out of the research phase. Imagine the press conferences if it had. Number 8. Bat bombs. Now, this is a weapon that really takes flight. Picture this: a bomb made up of thousands of tiny compartments, each containing a sleeping bat fitted with a small incendiary device. This weapon was designed by the US during World War II, and the plan was simple. Once released, the bats would wake up, fly into enemy buildings, and set them ablaze. These little furry bombers were meant to be dropped over Japanese cities, which were largely constructed from wood at the time. But after some mishaps during testing, including one where the bats accidentally set an Air Force base on fire, the project was abandoned in favor of a more familiar superweapon, something called the atomic bomb. Number 7. The acoustic kitty. Think James Bond meets Dr. Dolittle. During the Cold War, the CIA attempted to turn house cats into stealthy listening devices. How? By implanting microphones and antennas inside the cats' bodies. The idea was that these feline spies would inconspicuously wander into Soviet embassies or other high-security areas and record secret conversations. However, cats being cats, things didn't go as planned. The first acoustic kitty on its maiden spy mission was promptly hit by a taxi. Needless to say, the CIA quickly realized that training cats to be spies might not be the best idea. As cool as it sounds, the acoustic kitty mission was a $20 million failure. Number 6. The Tsar tank. No list of weird weapons would be complete without the Tsar tank. This massive, futuristic behemoth was designed by the Russian Empire in 1914. But instead of the traditional tank shape, the Tsar tank looked like something out of a steampunk novel. Two enormous front wheels, 30 feet in diameter, with a much smaller wheel at the back for steering. Sounds impressive, right? Well, the problem was that the tank's rear wheel wasn't strong enough to handle the rough terrain. During its first test, it got stuck in the mud and they couldn't free it. The Tsar tank was abandoned and the giant machine rusted away in a forest, a victim of its own unwieldy design. Number 5. Project Habakkuk. What's stronger than steel, more buoyant than wood, and could potentially stop the Nazi war machine in its tracks? The answer: ice. Specifically, a strange material known as pykrete, a combination of ice and wood pulp. During World War II, the British came up with the idea of building a massive aircraft carrier out of this frozen material to use in the North Atlantic. Named Project Habakkuk, the idea was to create a floating fortress immune to torpedo attacks. While tests proved that pykrete was surprisingly strong, the cost and logistics of building such a massive structure out of ice proved too much. The idea literally melted away. Number 4. Exploding rats. When it comes to outlandish weapons, the British during World War II had a particular affinity for rodents. British Special Operations Executive devised the exploding rat, essentially a dead rat stuffed with explosives. The idea was to leave the rats in German factories, where workers would throw them into the furnace for disposal, leading to a deadly explosion. However, the Germans discovered this plot early on, but it still had a psychological effect on them. They wasted time hunting down dead rats for fear of booby traps. Maybe not an outright victory for Britain, but still a win in the art of distraction. Number 3. The Krumlov. Ever tried to shoot around corners in a video game? Well, the Germans in World War II wanted to make that a reality. The Krumlov was a bent barrel attachment for the Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle that allowed soldiers to shoot around corners. The idea was to use it in urban warfare or inside tanks, where soldiers couldn't expose themselves to enemy fire. Though it sounds genius on paper, in practice, it didn't work so well. The bent barrels often jammed, bullets shattered or deflected, and overall, it was more trouble than it was worth. But still, the Krumlov remains one of the most ambitious yet impractical attempts to solve an age-old battlefield problem. Number 2, the Davy Crockett nuclear weapon. The Cold War saw the creation of many absurd weapons, but few were as extreme as the Davy Crockett. This handheld nuclear launcher was supposed to be used by American troops in case of a Soviet invasion. The weapon could fire a small nuclear warhead just a few miles away, short enough that the soldiers firing it would almost certainly be caught in the radiation fallout. The Davy Crockett was tested but never deployed in combat. Let's just be thankful that it never saw the light of day in a real conflict. Talk about a deadly case of friendly fire. Number 1, the war elephant armor. Finally, we can't ignore the massive beasts of war that terrorized battlefields in ancient times, war elephants. But one of the strangest additions to this formidable weapon, armor for the elephants. Used primarily in the armies of ancient India and Persia, these heavily armored elephants could charge into enemy lines, trampling everything in their path. Some elephant armor was even studded with spikes to impale soldiers. Though elephants themselves aren't that strange in battle, the sight of a massive, spiked and armored elephant was terrifying enough to make this list. There you have it, the most odd weapons ever used in history. Do you agree with our list? Comment your thoughts below. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay curious.